go, the diamond button. I thought it was the speaker. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Historic Preservation Commission meeting. It is July 16th, 2019, and it is approximately 9 o'clock, approximately. I would like to get the meeting going with introductions of our commission members, and we will start with our newest member to my right. If you would please just give us a little brief on your history, on your bio.
All right, well, my name is Dominique Cobb. I am the urban planner for the...
Your microphones are not.
Hello,
There
can you
you
hear
go.
me? Okay. Dominique Cobb. I am the urban planner for the Historic Preservation Commission. I have lived in Florida, Tampa, my entire life. Grew up in the West Tampa area, so I'm familiar with the history of the city. Also study urban planning, and I'm just happy to be here and serve our community.
Great, thank you.
Missy Shoecraft, Historic Preservationist.
Vivian Salaga, Preservation Architect.
Patricia Ortiz.
Tom Puckon.
My turn. Excuse me. We are ready for the swearing in.
Anyone in the audience who's going to be testifying, and staff, please raise your right hand and stand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you provide today is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I thought we just did that. All right, Dennis, are there any announcements this morning?
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. No announcements, but we do have the annual election of officers to take care of during this morning's meeting. Currently, Ms. Salaga serves as your chair, and Ms. Ortiz is your vice chair. The board has the ability to retain the current officers or propose new officers. Typically, how I do this is I will solicit nominations for the chair first and then the vice chair second, and we will take individual votes. I do ask that the individuals that are nominated do affirm that you're willing to serve in that position for the next year. So with that, I'll open the floor for nominations for the chairperson.
Well, I would nominate Miss Vivian and Miss Ortiz as the vice.
I thought we had just done this already.
Yeah, it seems like it.
I mean, it seems like it hasn't been a
Goes
year.
pretty quick.
Yeah, it did go by fast.
And I would serve if so chosen.
So we have one nomination for Ms. Salaga for chairperson. Is there any other nominations for chair?
I don't think he heard you.
He's just asking for other nominations for chair first. No,
Okay.
No.
With that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of having Ms. Salaga serve as the chair for the next year, please affirm.
Aye.
That's unanimous. And now nominations for vice chair.
Yeah, I'm willing to serve another term. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other nominations for vice chairperson? Seeing none, we would request a vote for that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Congratulations. With that, we can move on to the next item, which is the review of the minutes from the last meeting.
The minutes were previously sent to us. Has anyone a comment or a remark, an addition to the minutes?
I found the minutes satisfactory. I have no comment on minutes.
I find them pretty remarkable in their extent and accuracy. It's as if somebody's taking a verbatim recording of these minutes. It's pretty amazing. If as there appear to be no comments, then we will accept the minutes as submitted. Now,
Okay, with that, we'll move on to our next item, which is an addition to the work plan, and I'll ask Elaine Lund to come up and present a PowerPoint on that particular item.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff, have a presentation this morning for you regarding the Junta Homestead and Farm. This property is located in Ybor City, within the Ybor City Local Historic District. It's at 2401 East 11th Avenue, and we're here today to talk about adding it to the Historic Preservation Commission's work plan for consideration for local landmark designation. The Junta Homestead and Farm, as I said, is located within the boundary of our local Ybor City Historic District, and that is the area that you see within the red boundary on our district map. Now, a portion of this property is located in the National Historic Landmark District, which is indicated by the green line, and you'll see that that green line goes along 11th Avenue on the north side of the Junta property, which is the area that's outlined in blue there. It does include their house, you see that within that outline, but and a portion of the property, but the eastern end of the property is not included in the National Historic Landmark District boundary. So the applicants who are here today are interested in having the entire property recognized as a whole, and one of the methods that we've talked about for doing this is the local landmark designation. We'll talk a little bit more about why that's an appropriate recognition for this property as we get toward the end of the presentation here. So the early on in Tampa and Ybor City's history, this site was not included in what we think of as the Ybor City boundaries. Pretty much the area and to the west, I think maybe 22nd, 24th were sort of the boundaries of what most people would think of as Ybor City, because that's where the cigar factories and the worker housing primarily was. Even through 1915, you can see on the current map, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a sort of an outline along 7th Avenue showing the commercial district in Ybor City there, and that goes a little bit past 22nd, I think, but as you go to 24th, you'll notice that the area where the little star is, it's the site of the Junta property, was actually not covered by the Ybor maps at that point, indicating that there were no structures in that area that the Ybor map company thought were worthy of recording at that time. So as we move into the 1920s, you can see that the house that the Junta has built is there. It was built around 1924. The Junta family came to the United States in 1907 from Santo Stefano Cascina, Sicily. The parents, Salvatore and Vittoria Junta, came along with, they traveled with 3 of their children, only 2 were allowed into the country at that time. A few years later, after they'd saved enough money, the father, Salvatore, was able to return to Sicily to bring the rest of the children back to the United States with him. So the Junta settled in this east side of Ybor City. They, many of the family members worked in the cigar factories, but they also had a strong farming background from their homeland. And one of the things that they brought with them were the seeds from the plants that they grew on their farms near Santo Stefano. So farming was a big tradition for their family and for many other of the Sicilian families that came to this area. You can see on this 1920s map that even then the area sort of east of 24th was still not heavily developed. So a lot of these properties where you'll see the houses sort of not tight together. There was farming land there. There were dairies, maybe a few small pastures. So this property actually was part of what was once a celery field that was a large farm, celery farm, owned by Dr. Douglas, who was a prominent physician in Tampa around the turn of the century. And he eventually split up his property. I believe I want to say he passed away around 1925 or so. But the property that the Junta family bought was part of the Dr. Douglas celery field. They didn't buy the whole thing at once, and that would have been a lot of land to buy at one time. So they purchased the property where the house is now, farmed there for a bit, and then sort of acquired additional land as they were able to afford it. So you can see the Ybor maps as we progress through the years here on the left side of your screen. A portion of the land was sold off to one of the family members to build a house on the south side there. And our Ybor maps only go through 1976, but here you see the 2018 aerial also as well. It shows you how much of that's not changed. The house that was facing 10th Avenue is no longer there, but the Junta's homestead house and their accessory buildings are still there on the site. And this map just sort of shows you the importance of the area where the Junta's property was in relation to shipping. So the celery farms were on this end of town, and it's a little difficult to see on this map, unfortunately, but you can see that there are rail lines coming in and out of the port that sort of curve and meander north and east there. So this area was pretty well irrigated. There was a major spring that was northeast of this property, and the water would flow south to McKay Bay, which is the open land you see to the near the bottom right there where the Palm River or 6 Mile Creek empties into it. So part of the history of the property, of course, are the drainage systems and the irrigation systems that Dr. Douglas had built on the property, and some of the pieces of those still remain, underground and to this day. And but the Atlantic coastline and the seaboard coastline both had their rail lines running close to this farming area, so they could truck produce to the railroads, and it would be shipped north for market. So the house remains pretty much intact. You can see how it looked in 1949, and you can see then how it still looks today. It's a craftsman bungalow. There's a porte cochere on the east side of it. It has what's referred to as a camelback second story there, where the main portion of the main body of the house has a front gable, and then the second story has a side-facing gable on top of it there. There's some very nice detailing on this house. You see that in the brickwork and in the decorative truss that's in the gable end up top. So this is looking at the side of the house over the fields. It's a picture from a few years ago of the working farm. Different angle of the farm. Have the garage that was built, I believe, in 1951. And the other side of the garage there. Kind of looking toward the garage and the chicken coop. So there are some accessory buildings on the property and a small greenhouse as well. In addition to the farm, there's a small orchard, and the chickens, of course. Like many of their other neighbors in this area, many of whom are, I think I said already, also Sicilian immigrants. The family was able to grow their own food. They raised their own chickens and still do, obviously. They could bake their bread in their outdoor ovens, and they were largely self-sufficient. So, it's significant that this property has maintained its original use as a home and as a working farm since it first came into the family's ownership 2 or 3 generations ago, I think 2. So this is the 3rd generation still living there. So just to sort of recap the history here. The Juntas came to the United States in 1907, settling on the east side of Ybor City, which in the former celery field areas, in the area outside where the cigar workers and the cigar factories lived. Salvatore was able to return to Santo Stefano to bring his children back to the U.S. only after a few years of working and earning money in the profitable Ybor City area. I have on here that in 1920, the census shows that from the 1920 that the Juntas lived at the 2315 North 25th Street. This is only about 2 blocks north of the property that they were able to buy and begin farming. So I believe I had a conversation with the applicants just prior to this hearing, and they stated that there was another residence that the family lived in before that as well, but they were saving money, trying to be able to buy their own property, their own farm, and build their own house. So the family was able to hire a local craftsman to build the home for them, and again, they were able to acquire additional land as they saved their money, and got a little ahead of myself in my talk, I think. So yes, this is the 3rd generation currently now who owns and operates the Junta Homestead and Farm. So to summarize about some of the areas of significance here, that is the history of the family and the history of the use of the farm, the surrounding area, the neighbors. This was a common property type in Ybor City at that time. You don't see these working farms today, and this is the only one left that's still intact and still serves that use. So that's one of the areas of Ybor City's history that is not widely acknowledged. The property also has this very lovely home. It's one of the nicer craftsman bungalows in the area. It's an excellent example of that style that's found throughout Ybor City. And as I stated at the beginning of the presentation, the homestead and farm is located within the boundaries of the local historic district, but the National Historic Landmark District bisects the property, and excluding much of the farm and the orchard. So both in the local and the national designation reports, these homestead and farms, small farms, they're called out, they're mentioned, just maybe in a sentence here and there. However, they're not called out as a significant property type for Ybor City. The designation reports talk about the cigar factories, they talk about the worker housing, they talk about the social clubs of Ybor City, but they don't address the other side of life that was going on in that town. The people who lived and worked on these farms, some of the family members would work in the cigar factories, but they also were able to sell produce and other items, eggs, milk, what have you, to the people who worked in the factories. So they did support the community as a whole. So So the local landmark designation for the Junta Homestead and Farm would honor this, the legacy of these farms and provide enhanced protection for the property as a whole. So our staff recommendation today is that the Junta Homestead and Farm be added to the Historic Preservation Commission's work plan so that it can be considered for local landmark designation. The applicants are here this morning, and I believe they would like to address the board. May they? Okay.
Motions for you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Victoria Junta, and I reside at 2401 East 11th Avenue with my sister Beatrice Junta. We are the owners of the Junta Homestead and Farm. We both have lived there all our lives, and we're here to ask the Historic Preservation Commission to consider our request that the Junta Homestead and Farm be placed on your work plan for consideration as a City of Tampa local historic landmark. This morning, I would like to talk to you about the history of the Sicilian immigrants that settled in the East Ybor city area in the early 1900s and the farming community that developed. A majority of these early Sicilian immigrants were not educated and had no marketable skills to support themselves once they arrived here. They overcame these disadvantages by their willingness to do hard labor and the extensive agrarian skills that they brought with them, in particular farming as far as vegetable and dairy farming. In order to survive, they worked at whatever jobs they could find. They included low-paying jobs in the cigar industry and working in the large celery fields in East Ybor City. At that time, there were celery fields in the East Ybor area owned by Dr. Douglas, a physician. And he employed many of these Sicilian immigrants to cultivate his extensive farm. As the celery was harvested, it was taken by horse and wagon to the railroad at Adamo, Highway 60, and loaded onto boxcars for shipment up north. Eventually, Dr. Douglas began to sell some small parcels of his land that were part of the celery fields. Many of the Sicilians, including our grandfather, who originally worked this farm, began to buy these parcels to start their own small family farms. In time, each of these small farms supplied enough food for not only the family, but it also helped to supplement their income with the excess that they grew, vegetables and dairy, and the products thereof. So this was another way of supporting their livelihood in a difficult circumstance. Due to the fact that many immigrant farms were established in this Ybor City area, the first farmers market was created on 7th Avenue and 23rd Street. And now my sister Beatrice will share with you some of the early Junta family history.
I'm Beatrice Junta, and I reside at 2401 East 11th Avenue. The history of the Junta family in East Ybor City spans 112 years. The original owners who started the Junta Homestead and Farm were our grandparents, Salvatore and Victoria Junta. They were peasant farmers who came to the United States from Sicily in 1907. they sailed to America with just a few belongings and heirloom seeds from their homeland, and they disembarked at Ellis Island. Our grandparents settled in East Ybor City, and they worked in the cigar factories. My grandfather also worked as a day laborer and a farmhand in the celery fields. When Dr. Douglas began to sell parcels of land that from his celery fields, our grandparents, like many of the other immigrants, purchased several parcels and began to farm them, planting the heirloom seeds they had brought with them from Sicily. Once Salvatore and the family began farming, they were able to supplement their income by selling their vegetables and produce to stores in the area and by street peddling to workers at the cigar factories in Ybor City. Their goal was to save enough money to eventually have a house built on their property. Finally, in 1924, 17 years after their arrival here, the home was built on their property at the corner of 11th Avenue and 24th Street. Salvatore Junta died in 1930, and his widow, Victoria, continued the farm with the help of her children until her death in 1950. As the years passed, the farm was continued by one of Salvatore and Victoria's sons, Dominique V. Junta. He was our father. He continued to maintain the farm while attending school and later college at the University of Tampa. Dominic married our mother, Sarah, in 1941, and they lived at the homestead and farm where they raised their 4 children: Sarah Marie, Victoria, Dominic Jr., and Beatrice. Our father, Dominic, was a career educator by profession, but he always had a deep love of farming and continued to farm throughout his life. He died in 2007, and his wife, Sarah, our mother, predeceased him in 1980. Our brother, Dominic Jr., like our father, also loved farming and always helped to maintain the farm and its beehives, even though he had his own small farm at his home in Lutz, Florida. He too was a career educator. Dominic Jr. died in 2004. My sister Victoria and I continue to live at the homestead and farm and still carry on the tradition of farming to this day, though on a smaller scale. The Junta Homestead and Farm is the last example of an early immigrant farm that was established in East Ybor City in the early 1900s. Its documented history provides historical information and a better understanding of those early agrarian Sicilian immigrants who settled in the area. It represents a piece of Ybor City history that is not well known, should not be forgotten, and should be preserved. We thank you for this opportunity to meet with you today, and we will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for that very interesting summary. I think you can understand why the staff gravitated towards seeking the landmark designation for this particular property, because it's so unique and the history is so robust, such a vibrant part of Ybor City's history, the layers of different interesting historical components of it. Just from a procedural angle, where we're at today is we obviously have a lot of information already. Often when the staff's engaged in research for a landmark designation, we have to go through historical documents and weed through perhaps information that has different degrees of accuracy. But in this particular situation, we have a wealth of information that we're currently processing and working with the family, who also has a wealth of information about the family history that's important to document within the landmark designation. So you can see that we've got a very positive situation with the information that we have flowing in, and we're trying to capture that, and the family's been very cooperative in providing us photographs that we're able to scan in and then archive within our systems for future reference as well, which was very valuable. So today we're asking simply for the go-ahead for the staff to produce the landmark designation report, go through the procedural issues required in the code to notice, and then bring that back to you at a future hearing date. We hope to get this done, if not at the next meeting, then the following meeting, definitely by the end of the year. There's other things that are in process and being contemplated for this particular property to try to not only preserve it, but to bring the appropriate recognition, and we'll be discussing some of that when we bring the landmark designation back at a future meeting. If you have any questions, I think we have a lot of information that we presented to you, but I'm sure there's somebody here that can answer them for you. Thank you.
Before asking any questions or making any motions, you might want to ask for public comment, so you have that information too.
Is there anyone here present who would like to make a comment on this application? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion of this hearing and move to commissioners' comments and or questions. And I don't know, does anyone wish to begin?
I actually have a question just for...
Got to get used to this.
You're currently growing now? What type of vegetables or herbs are you growing on the property?
Yes, we still grow vegetables. Our farm season, because of the weather conditions that have changed over global warming and what have you, have changed. So our crops pretty much start now in late October, that we first sowed the seeds, and we harvest it, I'd say at the prime would be about February, March. And it sometimes will go as far, according to the season and how cool it is, all the way to early May. The crops are varied. We have a lot of winter crops, such as the carrots and the beets and the cauliflower, broccoli, and all the standards of that sort. Things that are more delicate for colder weather or damp weather don't do as well, like tomatoes. We do plant some unusual things. Some of these things are from the Sicilian culture. One of them is a vegetable called cardoon. Cardoon is a vegetable that's a family of the artichoke. But unlike eating the fruit of the artichoke, you literally eat the leaves. The leaves are very spiny, and they're prepared by shaving the greenery off and then cooking the stems in a certain way. And these make patties, and this is a tradition of Sicilian cooking. In addition to that, we had the seeds that my grandparents brought over. We don't plant the same seeds. They've been harvested each year as we grow crops. We always try to maintain those. And those are various types of endive as well as chard, various types of chard. In the Italian culture, we call them gili, and it makes a very unusual and tasty pizza pie, and that's a delicacy. So does that give you some insight into the things?
Yeah, thank you.
And just one more question.
You turned it on.
Do you still keep bees on the property?
Bees?
Bees.
Okay. After our brother's death in 2004, my sister received help from a local beekeeper to start taking care of the hives, which we did for several years ourselves. And after a certain amount of time, Vicky became super sensitive to the stings and went into anaphylactic shock.
Oh.
And we had to discontinue having the beehives, which my brother had there for many, many years.
But what we do for the bees is that we grow particular crops. One is the rapini that you see at the grocery store. When instead of leaving it in the closed flower like we cook at home, you know, we use it as a vegetable, we let that blossom. And when it does, it creates what looks like a fire burst. I mean, the bees are all over. It's all golden, the whole field. It's a beautiful sight, and you're helping the bees. So we're lucky on that.
Very good. And I just have one more comment. I've driven by your property several times, and I've always been very intrigued by it. So I'm very happy to have learned something here today. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I'd like to share only one other thing because it was brought up about the early farms. To this day, as I excavate to check on watering systems that we have underground and so forth, I still find the original watering system from these celery farms. The system they used was a triangular box covered on the top, flat on the bottom. The water ran into these ditches. The main ditch ran into these rows, and these boxes were all underground, and that's how they irrigated. And I still see pieces of the cypress wood that were used at that time.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds like a real educational opportunity for school programs to me.
I have I wanted to thank you so much for coming today and giving this wonderful presentation. And I really appreciate your family's commitment to preserving a part of our history in Tampa, particularly in Ybor City, that not a lot of people know of. And to that end, I hope that this additional designation will allow resources to help you archive so much of the information that you both carry with you, and I'm sure the city can assist in that manner. So thank you again, very much appreciated.
I too thank you as well, and hopefully this designation will also allow you to do future planning so that the farm can carry on in perpetuity in some manner or another. It would certainly be a shame to see it not continue.
I don't have anything else to add except, I mean, this is just a great example of integrity and significance to the National Register. I would maybe just a small comment for staff, like there's a minor typo, baked bread, fourth line from the bottom.
They backed it into the
Academic. So are there any other comments that anyone would like to make? So, hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion, and that motion would be to approve. So I would like to state that I move we adopt the staff recommendation and add the Junta Family Homestead and Farm to the historic, the HPC work plan. And I'd like to base that motion on the fact that the property is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad pattern of our history, because the property embodies distinctive characteristics of a specific time and period, and because the property has yielded information important to our history.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you.
Commissioners, moving on our agenda, the next item is a presentation on the Interstate Historic Preservation Trust Fund, and I have a PowerPoint to assist me with that presentation. I wanted to
They could get some of that.
just begin by providing a little information. I think the commission is familiar with a lot of the outreach that the staff is engaged in as far as the Historic Preservation Commission. We also have duties to serve as staff for the Architecture Review Commission and the Barrio Latino Commission, those regulatory commissions that somewhat carry on when your work is done and the recommendations made for local designation. Another area that the staff's responsible for is the administration of the Interstate Historic Preservation Trust Fund, which is an incentive program that has been created over the last 14 years through receiving funds as a result of relocated and sold properties related to interstate expansion and related to a lot of the protections in the National Historic Preservation Act that are handed down once a property or an area is determined to be significant, and then proper mitigation has to happen with impacts that those historic resources receive. Within the area of Interstate 4 and 275, there was, and as you're I think well aware, has been an ongoing expansion to those areas, and the Section 106 process that was initiated resulted in some funds being available to the city for its use related to historic preservation. And working with the community and with the preservation stakeholders, what was determined at that particular time was to create a revolving trust fund out of the funds that we received to be able to assist property owners both in the redevelopment of historic properties and in maintaining properties to continually be occupied by their owners. So I have a couple programs to give you an example of some of the effectiveness of this use of this revolving fund, in addition to being able to publicize some of our upcoming cycle deadlines and hopefully receive some applications. We ready to go? The mission of the Interstate Historic Preservation Trust Fund is to accelerate the exterior historic preservation of properties in the National Register districts of Ybor City, Tampa Heights, and West Tampa. So within the National Register districts of Ybor City, Tampa Heights, and West Tampa are where we can receive the applications from for work. That was where the funds were dedicated towards. So the funds come in different forms of our programs. We offer a low-interest loan program. We offer a home owner qualified grant program, not-for-profit matching grant program. We also can spend money for public improvement projects and emergency funding such as stabilizations or relocations. So eligible applicants can be residential commercial property owners, not-for-profit organizations, or cities, counties, and other units of local government. And the main focus of the fund is to provide structural stabilization, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing improvements, restoring exterior architectural details, which is a prioritized area, minor additions for contemporary adaptation of buildings, mothballing, soft costs related to engineering or architectural fees, and once again, emergency funding. And then all proposals must adhere to both the Secretary of the Interior standards, and if it is in the local historic district, also the local design guidelines. So since 2005, the program for the low interest loan fund has awarded $4 million, almost $700,000 of loans for the preservation and adaptive reuse of historic properties. Many of the properties that participate in this particular program are commercial businesses, and I'll show you some of those as we go through this program of what has been targeted. One of our first applications was the Behrman Morgan Cigar Factory in West Tampa, and there was a number of loans that were issued in this project as it became of reuse from what was originally the cigar factory building, was vacant for about 30 years, and then gentleman Nick Jamal purchased it and restored it into use for office and educational facilities. And it was a dive into the area. We learned a lot from these particular projects, and obviously projects of this scale, there's a lot of different components too, so there's a lot of areas that we became educated in very quickly. This is a photo of the Spoto building. We did a interior and exterior restoration on this building, kind of popular for the restaurant Acropolis that is a tenant on the first level. So as you can see, this is not, normally we're partnering with other funding sources. So there was obviously private funds that were introduced to this as well, in addition to our public funds. This was a residence that was essentially restored using the funds from the trust fund. And depending on the amount and depending on the scope of work, really results in the terms that we reach with the owner. We want to try to have an effective term that achieves the goal, but we want these funds to revolve back into the fund so that we can issue them out again. So we work with the business program that's at place to determine exactly what's appropriate for repayment period. This is the historic fire station number 5 in Tampa Heights. Was adaptively reused into a studio and residence. Was a surplus property for the city that the city had sold a number of years ago. The extensive structural work that went into this building, as well as the finishes. This is a contributing structure off of 15th Street in Ybor City. It was historically used as a bakery. I believe now it's a place of worship. So a lot of these properties that we're looking at, a conventional lender will not lend to these properties. So that's where the Preservation Trust Fund comes in. We do require that there's been an effort to obtain conventional funding before the application is made to the trust fund. See, there's a number of not only the finishing work, but a lot of structural work that went into this particular building as well. These are some structures that were relocated as a result of the interstate expansion. Next couple of structures were relocated from just abutting Interstate 4 further into the Ybor City District. And then upon transfer to a property owner, the restoration process began, and the Historic Preservation Trust Fund was somewhat of the perfect tool for these particular projects. So you can see they're heavily deteriorated and obviously were relocated because of their vulnerability to succumbing to the interstate when it expanded. And so the best of the inventory was chosen for these relocations, the ones that were the most unique and had the most possibility to be successfully reused. This structure was, and the abutting warehouse were actually relocated as well. It was a neighborhood store, a bodega, that was in the Ybor City neighborhood, and it was relocated to the corner of Columbus and 10th Street. Restored using the Preservation Trust Fund, and currently occupies, I believe, a marketing firm. What we're seeing on the upper right picture and lower right picture is the bread rack that was used in the bakery that was retained and became sort of an interesting component of the interior. It's another structure that was another residence that was relocated. So when these structures were relocated, new foundation and new pier systems are normally part of that relocation. You can see the lower left photo kind of shows the structure just after being moved on its new site. And then the trust fund came in to provide some of the finishes and some of the exterior improvements necessary in reconstructing the porch. This is one of our larger projects on 13th Street and 7th Avenue, historically referred to as the San Sushi Building. It was constructed in 1906 and housed a number of retail businesses as well as a theater. Some chiseling going on somewhere in the building. This building really was the impetus to the revitalization of the western portion of 7th Avenue. Once we saw this building restored, we've seen a number of other projects come into the area, which is the type of effect that the fund really strives for, is being a catalyst for other historic preservation projects in the vicinity. With these older buildings, this building was well over 100 years old. There's always things that are discovered when the project's underway, and usually, a lot of times they're interesting facts, but usually costly facts. And you see the lower right picture of how that project looks today. We did some emergency funding with the Cuban Club. Obviously, these are prioritized types of projects that really speak to the history of the area and the importance of preserving these structures. This is a property in Tampa Heights that received a loan through Russ Versace, who's done quite a few projects in the area. This was historically referred to as the opera singer's house, and went through an extensive restoration. Was originally constructed in 1913 and was restored in about 2013, when about 100 years after its construction. And it took a lot of exploratory work to really determine exactly what the original features were, but using a lot of the historical references and maps, we were able to do that. This is another project that Mr. Versace did, was a extremely dilapidated property off of Park Avenue, and we've done quite a few. Awards on Park Avenue. It's been sort of a target area for us, and the area is really improved, we believe, based on the investment of the trust fund. One of the more higher profile projects that we were involved with was the Frelita macaroni factory that had been deteriorated and essentially lost its roof at a certain point. Working with a number of private and public stakeholders, we funded the stabilization and restoration of this building. They also received some local grants, which were very helpful, and a lot of volunteers and pro bono work that was done on this particular project. Obviously, mandated a new roof, but a structural system was put into the building to stabilize the walls, and the building was then adaptively reused into a window business, but now is being converted into the Santo Stefano restaurant by Richard Gunsmart. That's currently underway. This is another property on Park Avenue that was severely deteriorated. This would have been across the street from Mr. Versace's, and Ms. Herbitite, who restored this property, did a wonderful job. This is a great way of not only keeping historic fabric, but really compelling people to kind of reconsider Tampa Heights, as Tampa Heights has continually been through this redevelopment phase, and not just introducing new construction, but repurposing, restoring and reusing the historic fabric that's within the district. This is a structure that was relocated for the expansion of Metropolitan Ministries. There's also 2 other structures that were part of this relocation. But this was a project in which the original structure was severely deteriorated. It was relocated to a more interior site within the Tampa Heights district and restored, and then now as housing a family within that particular structure. So I'll just move into the grant program. The grant program offers qualified homeowners the ability to receive up to a $15,000 grant for principally exterior restoration. We do also fund some plumbing, electrical, and mechanical, and interior finishes, but the majority of the funds do need to be expended on the exterior. Since 2007, we've awarded nearly $700,000 in these $15,000 grants, and it's a great tool for homeowners who need to restore, maybe a roof, structurally stabilize a building, open a porch, really kind of go in and try to make an impact to allow that individual to be able to remain occupying their residence and hopefully bring some improvement to the neighborhood that entices other investment within the structures. So some of the early work was really dealing with some severely deteriorated structures, dealing with inadequate foundation systems and electrical systems. We did a number of roofs. We do require that most roofs are going to end up being a metal roof, unless there's some other type of unusual roof that existed. So we do seek out, when applicants are requesting a roof, we try to restore the metal roofs to the neighborhood. And then always, there's usually always structural stabilization that is being done in some form in certain portions of the house as well. A lot of need is out there in the community to stabilize the foundations of these buildings. More roofs, exterior work with windows and trim, siding, just at the end hoping to have made a difference within the neighborhood that hopefully inspires other property owners. We get a lot of positive feedback, obviously, by these programs because we're able to go in fairly quickly and do the work and make a difference. This is a project where the porch was reopened and some windows were replaced, and you can see what a dramatic difference that makes on that structure, going from having the enclosed porch to the reopened porch. Not only does it improve the structure, just kind of reestablishes the entire streetscape. This is a project in Ybor City where we partnered with Paint Your Heart Out. We did some work, restorative work on the porch and the roof, and Paint Your Heart Out adopted the house for its target property. So there was, obviously a tremendous impact that was made for these residents, these owners of the house. Property owners within this program are able to choose their own contractor. The city partners with that contractor. We do require that they're licensed contractors that are doing the work, and then obviously that all permits and approvals are obtained. This is a property in West Tampa where there was some restorative work done on the porch and I believe some roof work. This is a property in Ybor City that we did some window restoration on. It was is obviously a very high style craftsman structure, and there was some very elaborate windows, both in the division, and much of the glass was beveled. So the property owner was really challenged by the prospect of restoring these windows. This was historically the house of Charlie Wall, the notorious mobster from the 50s. And it's an interesting history of the house, and it was a fun project to be involved with. Another project from West Tampa where there was roofing work and structural stabilization. This is a project in Tampa Heights off of Elmore, which abuts the interstate. It involved some roofing stabilization and window work. So you see there's a broad scope of what's going on here. We see some repetitive types of applications, but these are usually major ticket items for a property owner that they need some assistance with. This is a property in the Ybor City Historic District that originally started out with a screen porch. You see that on the lower left. Eventually that porch was enclosed, and then we worked with the owner to restore a portion of the original porch. So it was a project that was a significant restoration project, actually very close to the Junta homestead that we were involved with. And this was a portion of the Preservation Trust Fund funds and private investment. Obviously, that's a very extensive project that was undertaken. But it's a great way for property owners to be able to kind of leverage their money and utilize some additional funds. So this is a property in the originally in the National Landmark District, where there was exterior restoration as well as some interior upgrades to the plumbing that were done. This was a window replacement where the original windows were missing off of the structure, and new windows were introduced. They're wood windows. We require that when windows are reintroduced to the structures, that they are the original material, and these are impact windows as well. This was a porch restoration project, and we assisted with some interior plumbing and electrical upgrades as well. Very dramatic impacts to the owners' lives when you can assist in some of these projects. This is a project where the entire structure had been covered at one point with like a fiberglass siding material, and we worked with the owner to remove that and restore the wood that was underneath the siding. This was another porch restoration. You see the before and after. This is in the Tampa Heights Historic District. And this was another window project that was undertaken in the Ybor City Historic District, where the original windows were retained and restored. So we have a third program that's part of the Preservation Trust Fund, and that's a matching grant program. And this has a kind of a limited eligibility. It's for property owners that received the actual relocated properties that were part of the MOA. And a number of nonprofit organizations did receive that, like the Ybor City Museum Society that received a number of these structures along 19th Street. And this was one of the properties that Tampa Preservation Inc. received, and was subsequently restored, and we worked with them on a matching grant for this as well. So the Interstate Historic Preservation Trust Fund, as you can see, can be a very valuable tool to not only preservationists but to property owners. We have usually several cycles of this program that we're running each year. Currently, we're accepting applications for the low interest loan program until September the 4th. The homeowner qualified grant program, the deadline for applications is October the 2nd. And the matching grant program has an open application cycle to which an application can be submitted at any time. For information on this program and program documents, interested parties should contact the Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Division for the City of Tampa. And our number's there on the screen. It's 274-3100, option 3. Or they can visit our website at tampagov.net, where we have all the program information and applications. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Anyone? I guess not, Dennis.
Okay.
She does have one.
Okay.
still fairly new to this process. I know the application process is online, but is there any type of sponsorship to where you can push it out to the public? Because a lot of the public is not aware of these deadlines unless they go on the site. What other avenues are being used to make sure this gets out?
Presentations like this is one avenue. That's why I took the opportunity to do that. But also, when we establish the deadlines, we place those on the city's bulletin board on the city's TV station so that they cycle with the other messages. And some individuals tune into that particular station for information. We also send out letters to the homeowners associations in each neighborhood and any area that really kind of connects with the eligible areas so that they're aware of that. And we have a number of homeowners associations that kind of take a stewardship role and identify people within, particularly for the homeowner grant program, that identify potential applicants. And then once they put them in contact with the staff, we'll assist them. We have staff members that are very efficient at assisting for both filling out the applications and giving them advice and information about, what the necessary information is or where it can be found at. And then also assisting them through the entire review process, because there's an advisory board that eventually will receive these applications and consider them and rank them and then determine if they should be funded. Ultimately, the funds are allocated through City Council. And then taking opportunities to visit neighborhoods and speak to the neighborhoods, not only about the preservation program as a whole, but I always include this program and hopefully, individuals that can benefit from it are made aware. Because that's really why these programs are out there, and that's why we go through the effort of trying to outreach to the neighborhoods to hopefully put the money where it needs to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do have to add that the 3 neighborhoods that are involved in this program are the neighborhood association is very, very proactive, and these neighborhoods talk to each other and within their own neighborhood association. So typically there's never a lack of information available through the neighborhood association.
Once we complete a project in an area, we'll usually get other applicants in that block that learn about it from their neighbors, and that's really a great way, because that obviously means that there was a positive experience there during that process. And some people are hesitant to engage in projects with government in general, and and so that trepidation, once that misinformation is dealt with and there's people that are identified that can assist you, usually we can work with homeowners at that particular time to be successful in this program.
Well, I guess you're not off the hook yet, Dennis.
Oh, yeah.
So our next item on the agenda is the update to the revision of the Ybor City Local Historic District Guidelines.
Yes. So this is just going to be a brief verbal update. I wanted to continue to keep this item on the agenda because it's a significant initiative that the division is engaged in. Since we last met, I gave you a presentation on essentially what the revision process entailed. We've been working with the city's contract administration department to identify eligible firms to be able to bid on the revisions to the design guidelines. And we've been able to since we met, we've been able to go through the list and identify essentially what staff feels are the eligible and qualified firms. And contract administration will be now reaching out to those firms for proposals. So we're still within the very infancy of this process, but what I'm expecting is by our next meeting, I'll be able to have an identified firm and have a much more deliberate outline of what the time frame's going to be for at least the public engagement portion of the revision process, which obviously is a very important component, is getting out to the public and understanding where some of the areas are that need to really be concentrated on. So I'll continue to bring you updates on this item. It'll remain on the agenda, but for today, the main message is that we're still in the initial processes of choosing a consultant.
And our next agenda item, Dennis, is the date and time of our next HPC meeting.
That's correct. The next meeting will be September 17th, unless we receive an application that warrants us to meet in August. We haven't yet. So the next regular meeting would be in September.
Excellent. Is there anyone who has a new business that you'd like to raise? I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the flyer that was included in our packets today for the celebration of the Cuban Club's Centennial on Friday, July 26th. It's really a remarkable building, and if you haven't been inside of it yet, it would be wonderful if you could take advantage of this opportunity and visit the building.
The social clubs throughout the historic areas, but particularly in Ybor City, that are still active, really take a dedicated group of individuals to sustain those buildings. As you can see, architecturally elaborate buildings that are very expensive to maintain and are obviously older buildings that are very expensive to maintain on their own. So these organizations are really to be commended, and it's always wonderful to see a property like the Cuban Club being restored both through private and public funds. And I think this is a good opportunity to showcase some of the successes there.
Mm-hmm. The Hillsborough County runs a program for historic preservation grants as well, and I know the Cuban Club has been a recent recipient twice of that grant program, which really helps to provide some impetus and some leverage in order for these owners to be able to take advantage of restoration programs.
Okay.
Any further new business anywhere? Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
Before adjourning, you might take a motion to accept and file the documents that were received today.
Thank you for that reminder. May I have a motion to accept and file?
I'll make a motion to accept and file all documents received at today's meeting.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Then we are adjourned. It is 10:11 a.m. Well, at least on this clock. Not on that one.